The roast chicken was perfect. Golden brown skin, a hint of rosemary, juices sealed tight. Nora drizzled the honey thyme glaze carefully, just as her grandmother had taught her. She adjusted the foil, placed the dish into the carrier, and stood back for a moment, wiping her hands on her apron. Everything was warm, comforting, personal, and it wouldn't matter, because in about 30 minutes she'd walk into her in-laws' home and hear the same thing she'd heard for the last 7 years. "Oh, Nora, how rustic. You really do love butter, don't you? Next time, maybe keep it simple. Not cafeteria simple, just elegant." Nora swallowed the knot in her throat before it formed. Not tonight, she told herself. Just go, smile, survive. The Davenport family home always felt more like a showroom than a house. Gleaming tile, oversized wine glasses, too many throw pillows to sit comfortably. Nora stood at the front door balancing the chicken, a Tupperware of scalloped potatoes, and a homemade apple tart that had taken her 3 tries to get right. Door swung open. "Finally," said Carly, her sister-in-law. "We were starving." She didn't offer to help with the food. Instead, she spun around in her linen romper and walked off, yelling over her shoulder, "We're doing lemon herb cod tonight, but feel free to put your stuff next to the salads." Nora stepped in quietly. No one looked up. The dining room was a loud, curated chaos of designer plates and wine bottles. Her husband, Michael, was already seated, laughing with his brother and sipping from a deep red pour. When he spotted her, he gave a weak smile. "Hey babe, you brought the apple thing." "Yeah," Nora said, setting the dishes on the side counter. "I made Nana Jean's recipe. The one with the brown sugar crust." Carly appeared again, holding a glass of Sauvignon Blanc. "Oh, how sweet. You're still trying that old-fashioned stuff. Kind of charming." Her mother-in-law Doreen sniffed. "At least it'll give the kids something to chew on while the cod finishes." The others chuckled. Nora didn't. Dinner was a slow descent into subtle humiliation. They passed around plates, complimented the caterer's cod, dissected wine pairings Nora didn't understand. When the roast chicken finally reached the table, Doreen gave it a polite sniff and muttered, "Smells hearty." No one reached for it, not even Michael. The potatoes went untouched. The tart was cut into a few slivers, mostly by the kids, then pushed around their plates. Carly leaned over and whispered loudly, "You know, you should really look into that culinary class at the club. They teach plating and presentation, might help with all this farmhouse chic." Nora smiled. The kind of smile that hides tears and turns into ulcers later. Inside, she was boiling. Later that evening, while helping clean up, she overheard them in the hallway. "It's like she thinks she's doing us a favor bringing food. Honestly, Pinterest meets PTA mom. You'd think after all these years she'd improve. She married Michael, not the rest of us. She doesn't need to pretend she's family." The laughter that followed was the worst part. Familia, practiced, backroll. Nora drove home alone that night. Michael had stayed behind to help with the after-dinner bourbon tasting. Of course he had. She sat in the driveway of their modest little house, gripping the wheel, still smelling like roast chicken and disappointment. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. Not this time. Something inside her had cracked, but not the kind that breaks. The kind that lets something through. She stepped inside, turned on the light, and walked to the kitchen. The counters were clean, the dishes stacked, the tiny windows showed nothing but darkness. Nora reached for a pen and an old notebook from the junk drawer. It was her grandmother's, filled with scribbled recipes, taped in clippings, and oil-stained corners. She flipped it open and whispered to herself, "They think I can't cook." She turned the page. "They think I'm a joke." Another page. "Fine. Let's see how they like 5 stars next door." Her fingers tightened around the pen. She circled a recipe. And just like that, the fire they tried to smother started to simmer. The next morning, Nora woke up before the sun. She moved quietly through the kitchen, still barefoot, still wearing last night's ache in her shoulders. But her eyes had changed. There was no trembling now, only precision. She pulled out flour, eggs, lemons, fresh basil, the good kind. Not the wilted bundle she used to save for Sundays. Her notebook sat open on the counter, pages marked with her grandmother's looping handwriting. She started small, lemon olive oil, cake with basil syrup. The scent filled the house by 7 by 7:30. Her neighbor Jasmine knocked on the door, her hair in rollers and her 3-year-old on her hip. "Nora," she sniffed the air. "Girl, what are you baking in there?" "Cake," Nora said simply, with a few upgrades. Jasmine looked at the glass dish. Did you start taking orders? Please tell me you started taking orders. Nora smiled. I'm just testing. Want to try. By 9 a.m. Jasmine had texted a picture of Nora's cake to her WhatsApp group, Book Club Brunch Moms. By 10:15. Nora had a text from someone named Gina asking if she could do a tray of whatever that was for Saturday's event. She stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Yes, absolutely. It felt small, but it felt real. That afternoon, she pulled out her old laptop and searched how to start a catering business from home. The search results made her chest tighten. Permits, inspections, legal hoops. Too much, but her finger hovered. She clicked anyway. 2 nights later, she catered Gina's small baby shower brunch. 12 women, 3 platters of food, all gone within 15 minutes. They handed her business cards, compliments, tips. One woman asked, "Do you have a storefront?" Nora paused. Not yet. But in her head, she heard it clearly. Not yet doesn't mean never. The following weekend, Nora and Jasmine walked downtown for coffee. As they passed the old corner bakery, the one that had been boarded up for months, Nora slowed down. The for-lease sign was faded but clear. Jasmine caught the glance. You thinking what I'm thinking? Nora's lips parted slowly. It's literally right next to the Davenport event hall. Shut up, Jasmine gasped. Where Carly's having her wedding. Exactly there. They both stared in silence. Then Jasmine grinned. Let me know when to bring paint. Back at home, Nora pulled out her savings. She had just enough to put a deposit on the lease, but not enough for renovations. Licensing, equipment. She needed help. She'd never asked for help before, especially not for something for herself. But she remembered how small she'd felt in that dining room, how they smirked when she set down the tart, how no one even passed it around. And she knew this wasn't just about a restaurant, it was about reclaiming her space. Within 2 weeks, she applied for a small business empowerment grant, offered to women entrepreneurs in the city. She got approved for a $35,000 starter loan. When the check came in, Nora didn't scream, she didn't cry, she just rolled up her sleeves and picked up a measuring tape. The renovations began. Jasmine helped her clean. A friend of a friend installed the counters. A neighbor donated secondhand shelves. The walls were painted in earthy tones, warm clay, and thyme green. She spent nights testing recipes, early mornings, ordering ingredients. And slowly, quietly, she transformed the old bakery into something new. A place of flavor, of confidence, of soul. She called it Simmer and Soul. The logo, a vintage ladle, wrapped in steam and handwritten script. On opening day, Nora wore a simple black apron, tied high. Her hair was in a low bun. Her grandmother's silver locket hung just beneath her collar. No flyers. No ads. Just a small sign on the sidewalk that read, Simmer and Soul, now open. The first customers came in, curious neighbors, a few moms from Jasmine's group, a couple who'd seen her at the baby shower. By noon, she had a line, and by 4 p.m., she had her first repeat customer. She stood behind the counter, watching the crowd eat, laugh, and asked for more. No one laughed at her plating. No one mocked her. Ingredients. No one compared her to Pinterest. They asked for seconds, and just before she closed, she heard someone outside say, "You smell that? It's coming from that place next to the Davenports." Nora locked up, turned off the lights, and leaned against the door. The sun was setting. The real heat was just beginning. 3 weeks after the soft opening of Simmer and Soul, Nora stood behind the counter, wiping down the pastry case, humming under her breath to an old Etta James song playing from her phone. It had been a good week. No, it had been a great week. The mornings were growing steady with regulars, teachers grabbing Biscuit, a retired nurse who always asked for the honey butter special, and a group of high school students who came after class for fresh lemonade and homemade shortbread. For the first time in years, Nora didn't wake up dreading the day. She owned it. Mid-afternoon lull, Jasmine swung in, wind-chapped cheeks, her toddler in one arm, and a coffee in the other. "You're not gonna believe what I just saw," she said, breathless. Nora raised an eyebrow. "Unless it's someone proposing outside, I'm not impressed." "Nope, better, or worse, depending how you feel." Jasmine leaned over the counter and whispered, "Carly's having her wedding reception next door, at the Davenport event hall." Nora blinked. Then blinked again. Jasmine leaned back, watching her carefully. "You okay? Just. Wow. It wasn't really surprising. The Davenports owned that event hall. It was practically their turf. Of course Carly would host her wedding there, but now, Nora's restaurant was just a brick wall away. What were the odds? She tried not to smile, failed. That night, Nora stood outside after closing, leaning against the cool brick between her restaurant and the Davenport hall. She stared at the elegant wrought iron sign next door, the Davenport Room. Events, weddings, receptions. Inside, workers were setting up golden Chiavari chairs and ivory centerpieces. The place sparkled with glass and quiet. Superiority. She used to think she'd never belong in a place like that. Now she realized she didn't need to belong. She just needed to be right beside it and build something better. In the days that followed, things accelerated. Word about Simmer and Soul spread fast, faster than Nora expected. A local food blogger wrote a glowing review. Pictures of her caramel apple brioche French toast started trending on foodie pages. A small newspaper column even dubbed it the soulful secret of Main Street. Meanwhile, the Davenport event hall became a circus of wedding prep. Nora watched it all quietly from her kitchen window. One morning, she overheard two of Carly's bridesmaids standing outside, arguing about the lackluster wedding caterer. Everything's coming from a hotel buffet. Are we sure about that? Carly said, it's elevated rustic, whatever that means. Nora kept stirring her pot of smoked tomato bisque, a knowing smile dancing at the edge of her lips. On a Wednesday afternoon, just 10 days before the wedding, Carly herself strutted into Simmer and Soul. No warning, no high, no pretense, just sunglasses, designer coat, and her usual tight-lipped smirk. Well, she said, looking around. So this is your little cooking club. Nora stayed calm. Welcome to Simmer and Soul. Can I get you a menu? Carly snorted. Oh no, I'm not here to eat. She looked around, judging every detail from the reclaimed wood tables to the chalkboard specials. It's cute, she said, almost convincingly. Very, modest. Nora didn't bite. And I hear you've been getting some buzz, Carly added. Even the yoga moms are talking about you. Word travels fast, Nora replied smoothly. Well, Carly leaned in slightly. Just so we're clear, my guests won't be stopping by here during the reception. This is a formal event. Nora tilted her head, smiling. Of course, I wouldn't expect them to. Carly paused, clearly hoping for a reaction that never came. Finally, she said, anyway, congratulations on whatever this is. And with that, she turned and walked out. Jasmine, who had been behind the counter sneaking cookie dough, peeked out from the kitchen. Did she seriously just, yep, and you didn't throw a rolling pin at her? Nora grinned. No need. She looked out the window, where Carly was reapplying lipstick in her reflection. Let her have her venue, Nora said softly. I've got my kitchen. The day Carly's wedding finally arrived, Nora opened Simmer and Soul early. She prepped twice the usual stock: biscuits, sandwiches, mini tarts, soups, and sweet tea. By noon, the Davenport hall was buzzing with high heels and camera flashes. A valet parked BMWs and Bentleys. A harpist played near the entrance. It looked like a royal affair. But inside Simmer and Soul, a different kind of magic brewed. Locals came for lunch, many dressed in wedding attire. Some guests peeked inside, drawn by the smell of cinnamon cornbread and smoked peach glaze. By 2 p.m., Nora's cafe was full. At Laundan Schwufen, the Davenport hall's caterer forgot the gluten-free options. By 2:45, Carly's groom's cousins had slipped next door just for snacks, and by 3:30, the Davenport wedding party realized something horrifying. Their reception had a ghost buffet, while the little cooking club next door had a line out the door. The Davenport wedding was in full swing. White roses, gold-trimmed glassware, ambient lighting like something from a bridal magazine. But inside Simmer and Soul, the air crackled with something different. Soul, laughter, clinking plates, the low hum of blues guitar under a chorus of, "What is this sauce? And I need another one of those lemon butter rolls." Nora hadn't meant to compete, but her regular Saturday customers had turned into Carly's wedding guests with good taste. At 3:55 p.m., a man in a tailored blue suit slipped in through the side door. He looked out of breath. "Hey," he said, leaning on the counter. "You got any of those smoked turkey sliders left?" "Maybe two," Nora said, peeking over her shoulder. "You coming from the wedding?" He smiled. "Yeah. Their caterer ran out of odd, and the bar's got one brand of wine and lukewarm shrimp." My cousin told me this is where the real party's at. Jasmine, standing beside Nora, leaned close. Are we officially stealing wedding traffic? Nora shrugged modestly. There, just hungry, but deep down, oh, it felt glorious. By 5 p.m., half of Simmer and Soul's guests were from the wedding next door. They ordered mini pies and 3 kinds of sliders. Someone asked if they could pay for Nora to bring a tray over to the Davenport Hall. She declined. Deliberately. At 5:18, Carly stormed into the restaurant, heels clacking like gunshots across the tile. Her hair was pinned in a flawless chignon, and her ivory gown glimmered under the soft cafe lights, but her expression absolutely livid. This, she hissed, is sabotage. Nora calmly wiped her hands on a towel. Sorry. You knew we were hosting a high-profile private event, and you poached my guests. Nora blinked slowly. Your guests walked in here, hungry. I fed them. You fed them, our guests, Carly said. Now half my bridal party's posting pictures of your food. Nora pointed to the chalkboard wall where someone had doodled love served warm in pink chalk. I guess it photographs well. A few of the guests, including a woman in a pale blue bridesmaid dress, chuckled under their breath. Carly turned toward them, mortified. You're embarrassing yourself, she snapped. One man stood and gently defended Nora. Honestly, Carly, this place is incredible. You should have asked her to cater. Carly's jaw tightened so hard it clicked. But Nora stayed cool. I'm not trying to outshine you, she said softly. I'm just serving food. That's all I've ever done. That was when he stood up, a gray-haired man at the back table, neatly dressed, eyes alert. He approached the counter and offered his hand. Name's Roland Webb, he said. I write for the Fork and Flames small regional magazine. Been hearing about your food for a few weeks now. Finally had a reason to check it out. Nora shook his hand, heart thudding in her chest. Well, he smiled. Guess I found my story. Carly looked like she might explode. By 6:15 p.m., Carly had dragged herself back to her reception, but the damage was done. Guests kept trickling in and out of Simmer and Soul. Nora kept cooking, plating, serving. She didn't stop smiling once. Her kitchen was full, her dining room was full, and her heart overflowing. Later that night, after locking up, she sat by the window with a mug of tea, watching as the Davenport Hall emptied out. High heels clicked on sidewalks. Laughter faded. Someone cried near a parked car. Carly's perfect night had cracked. Not because Nora tried to ruin it, but because Nora had finally shined, and the people Carly wanted to impress chose something real instead. The next morning, her phone buzzed before she'd even gotten out of bed. It was an Instagram post, a picture of her lemon tart, a caption from the food critic. Sometimes the best bites are found beside the fanciest halls. Simmer and Soul is the best kept secret in this town. Not for long. Nora blinked, then smiled, and said aloud, to no one but herself, let them eat cake, mine. Nora had never been busier, and she had never felt more alive. Her restaurant, Simmer and Soul, had gone from a quiet passion project to the most talked about eatery on the block. New customers came daily, some curious, others regulars, dragging their friends in like a secret too good to keep. And yet, the more her days filled with warmth and flavor, the colder her nights became at home. Baffa didn't talk much anymore, not since Carly's wedding. He'd come home that night with red cheeks and forced laughter, tossing his jacket onto a chair like he hadn't just heard his entire family whisper about how Nora's cooking stole the show. He hadn't mentioned it once. Instead, he'd gone to bed early. No kiss. No proud of you. Just silence. Weeks passed, and Nora noticed this shift more clearly. Michael, once mildly supportive, the kind of supportive that meant, don't ask for help, but, I'll nod while you dream, had started to withdraw. He'd make jokes at breakfast, like, can't believe you're still doing this full-time. Thought it was just a phase. Or, you should take a break one of these weekends. Cook for us for a change. Nora would smile politely, then return to her prep schedule. He didn't understand that she was finally cooking for herself. One Saturday night, after another successful dinner rush, Nora returned home to find Michael sitting in the living room, staring at his phone. He didn't look up when she entered. Hey, she said softly, we sold out tonight. The peach glazed chicken went in under an hour. He muttered. She placed her keys on the table. The critic's review got picked up by local bites too. They want to feature the restaurant next month. Michael exhaled through his nose. Right. A long pause. Then he looked up and said, flatly, so what's the plan now? You just run this little place forever. Nora stared at him, stunned. That little place pays our mortgage. I work, too, you know, he said defensively. I know, she replied calmly, but I'm finally doing something that matters to me, something that works. Michael stood up. It's just, not what I signed up for. That sentence hit harder than he realized. Nora folded her arms. No, you signed up for the version of me that never took up space, that smiled when your sister mocked me and stayed quiet while your mother judged my cooking. I signed up for normal, he said, not whatever this is. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. She just turned, walked to their room, and shut the door. 3 days later, she filed the paperwork. The moment she stepped into the county office and handed over the signed documents, a strange peace washed over her, not sadness, not bitterness, clarity. Jasmine found out that night when Nora returned to the cafe for late-night inventory. You okay? She asked gently. I'm better than I've been in years, Nora replied. I think I've been serving meals to people who didn't even bother to taste them. Jasmine reached for a cookie and raised it like a toast. To feeding yourself first. Nora clinked her glass of lemonade against the cookie. The divorce went through quietly. Michael didn't fight. He moved in with a coworker. The house felt different without him. Lighter, quieter, cleaner. Nora stayed focused. She poured her heart into every dish. The community noticed. Customers started calling her Chef Nora. A local magazine requested a photo shoot. A few young women from the community asked to apprentice under her suddenly. She wasn't just a cook. She was a mentor, a businesswoman, a chef with a full house, and no husband to clean up after. One evening, as she locked up the restaurant, a little girl pressed her face to the glass door and said, Your place smells like my grandma's kitchen. Nora knelt down and smiled. That's the best compliment I've ever gotten. That night, she sat alone at table 4, the small booth near the window, and ate a warm bowl of lentil stew she'd made with ginger and garlic. Confit. Alone. At peace. Full, in every sense of the word. She looked out at the Davenport Hall, now closed for the evening, and whispered to herself, Let them have their gold chairs and cold shrimp. I've got flavor. 6 months had passed since the grand chaos of Carly's wedding. 6 months since Simmer and Soul became more than a restaurant. It became a symbol of Nora's quiet rise. Her walls were now lined with photos, glowing reviews, snapshots of smiling patrons, thank you cards from mothers, artists, newlyweds. The once bare brick cafe had become a community cornerstone, but what Nora didn't expect was who would walk in next. It happened on a calm Thursday, late afternoon, light rain tapping the windows. Nora stood at the counter, arranging rosemary scones into a vintage tin, when the doorbell jingled, and in walked Doreen, Michael's mother, Carly's queen, draped in pearls and a tailored coat, her mouth tight and unsure, like she'd bitten into something bitter and hadn't swallowed yet. Nora blinked once. Mrs. Davenport, she said evenly. Doreen cleared her throat, glancing around the now bustling cafe. Her eyes paused on the Simmer and Soul featured in Taste Weekly plaque. I thought I'd stop in, she said. I've heard ... things, good things, I hope. Nora replied. Silence. Then, Doreen nodded stiffly. It smells ... inviting in here. Nora gestured to the counter. Would you like something? I just pulled the cranberry pecan loaf out of the oven. Doreen hesitated. Then, just coffee. Nora poured her a cup herself. No assistance. Number. Fusk. Just a clean mug and a generous pour. Doreen took a sip and sat by the window. The silence between them buzzed. Finally, the older woman said, I was ... wrong. Nora looked up. About what? Doreen swallowed. About you. About what you were capable of. I thought ... your food was a hobby. A distraction. And now, Doreen's voice dropped. Now, my bridge group won't stop talking about your cornbread. That made Nora laugh. A real, full laugh that echoed across the cafe. It wasn't mocking. It was just release. Doreen smirked slightly. You've built something. I have, Nora said softly, without permission, without help. Just taste and heart. Doreen stood nodding. Then, almost too quietly, I wish my son had seen that sooner. She left without fanfare, but the door swung shut with finality. A page had turned. Later that week, Carly showed up, hair perfectly curled, face stiff. She ordered 2 cupcakes to go, said nothing, didn't make eye contact, but Nora noticed her glancing at the menu board. saw her fingers brush the napkin printed with the cafe's logo. She didn't need to say it. The silence was the apology that weekend. Nora hosted a harvest dinner, a 5-course set meal for local artisans and teachers. Reservations sold out in under an hour. Nora wore white linen and gold hoops and greeted every guest by name. One of them, a food investor from Austin, shook her hand and said, "Have you ever considered franchising?" She blinked. "What?" He gestured to the room. "This isn't just a restaurant, it's a brand, a feeling. I'd invest in 5 more of these tomorrow." Nora felt her hands tremble slightly, not from nerves, but possibility. That night, she called Jasmine, who screamed so loudly she dropped her phone. "You're about to become a movement," Jasmine shouted. "You need t-shirts, a documentary, a soul food empire." Nora laughed, heart pounding with joy. She walked through the quiet cafe, trailing her hand across every chair, every frame, every lamp she'd hung herself. Then she whispered to no one but the walls, from mockery to a menu, from leftovers to legacy. The investor's offer sat in her inbox like a glowing pie in a window, tempting, fragrant, and full of possibility. 5 new restaurants, cities she'd never even visited, menus printed on glossy paper, her name, Nora Davenport, on billboards. But something inside her paused. This place, Simmer and Soul, wasn't just a business, it was hers. Every wall painted with her sweat, every chair warmed by the stories of those who came hungry and left full in more ways than one. Could she replicate that 5 times over? Or would it dilute the very thing that made it soulful? One rainy afternoon, Nora sat at table for her favorite, rereading the proposal. She traced her finger over the words, full ownership and brand expansion, trying to picture it. That's when the door chimed softly. She looked up. A man stepped inside, soaked from the rain, holding a familiar umbrella she hadn't seen in years. Isaac, her college friend. Her, almost more than a friend. The one who moved away before she married Michael. The one who once tasted her sweet potato pie and said, this could fix the world. She stood, stunned. "Isaac," he grinned, water dripping from his jacket. "Heard you opened Heaven's Kitchen. Figured I'd come see for myself." They sat at table 3. She brought him buttermilk biscuits with honeyed fig jam. He took one bite and closed his eyes. "Still, the best thing I've ever put in my mouth," he mumbled. They caught up between bites, old memories, new lives. He'd moved back to town for work. He wasn't married. He asked about Michael. Nora just shook her head. When he asked how she was really doing, she finally confessed. "There's a fork in the road. Expansion, franchise." He leaned forward. "Do you want that?" "I don't know. I love what I've built, but part of me wonders if I could feed more souls, touch more lives." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes, feeding one town well is worth more than feeding 10 cities thin." That night, Nora stood in her quiet kitchen long after closing. She rolled dough not for business, but for peace. And she remembered something her grandmother once told her while kneading bread. "There's power in small batches. You feel every rise. You control the love." She turned off the lights, decision already rising like yeast. The next morning, she emailed the investor, respectfully declined. She would open one more location in the next town over, close enough to keep heart in every bowl. Far enough to share her light. No chains, no franchises, just soul. Weeks passed. Construction began on the new cafe. Nora hired 2 apprentices. She taught them how to taste with their eyes closed, how to let sauce speak, how to hold space for guests having hard days. Isaac stopped by often, sometimes for dessert, sometimes to help repaint chairs, always with the same question in his eyes, ready for someone who knows what your cooking is worth. She wasn't ready yet, but her heart was warming in the oven. One evening, she hosted a soft reopening at the original Café Doreen. Came quietly, Carly, too, in muted tones, no makeup, no attitude. Carly approached her after dessert. She held out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I know it's late, but happy 1-year anniversary." Inside was a vintage measuring spoon set. Engraved on the back of the largest one were the words, "For the woman who measured more than we ever gave her credit for." Nora looked up, eyes glistening. Carly whispered, "You were never just the cook." As Nora closed up that night, Isaac leaned against the counter, watching her stack chairs. "You ever think about adding something sweet to the menu?" "I've got 7 desserts already." She smiled. He took a step closer. "I meant someone sweet in the kitchen." She laughed, really laughed, and for the first time in a long time, didn't change the subject. The 1-year anniversary of Simmer and Soul felt more like a town festival than a restaurant. Celebration, lanterns glowed outside, casting golden light onto the sidewalks. Tables spilled onto the patio, dressed in patchwork cloths and jars of sunflowers. Children ran with mini pies wrapped in napkins. Elderly couples swayed to live jazz, played by a high school trio. Nora stood at the doorway in a deep maroon apron, her silver hoop earrings catching the porch light. She watched the crowd the way a mother watches her grown children, proud, protective, peaceful. She had created all this, not from revenge, but from resilience. Inside, table 4, sat reserved, a handwritten card reading, reserved for what comes next. Jasmine had insisted she save one spot. Manifestation seating, she'd called it. Something good always walks through that door when you leave it open. And, just after sundown, it did. The door opened gently. A familiar silhouette stepped through. Michael. He looked older, heavier in the eyes, lighter in posture. No smirk, no ego, just a man walking into the last place he ever expected to be welcomed. Nora blinked once, then nodded toward a seat by the window. Michael sat down quietly, looked around, at the art on the walls, the full tables, the line of people waiting patiently for food made with care. Finally, he said, "I didn't get it before." Nora folded a napkin. "No, you didn't." He cleared his throat. "But I came to say something you always deserved to hear." Nora waited. "I'm sorry for not seeing you, for letting them mock you, for trying to shrink you into a life you'd outgrown." She nodded slowly. "Thank you." Then she added, softly but firmly, "I forgave you a long time ago. But I didn't build all this to be understood. I built it to be free." Michael stood, eyes damp. "You were always the better cook." He smiled weakly. "No," Nora replied. "I was always the better recipe. You just didn't taste properly." He left, without trying to fix the past, and that was enough. Later that night, Jasmine lit candles. Isaac passed around trays of molasses butter cake. Nora stood on a small, wooden crate near the counter and tapped her spoon on a glass. The room fell quiet. "I opened Simmer and Soul because I had something to prove," she began. "But somewhere along the way, I stopped cooking out of pain. I started cooking from peace." Applause broke out, soft at first, then full and warm. She held up her glass of sweet tea. "To every person who doubted me," she said with a smirk, "you made this meal taste better." Laughter echoed across the room. Then she turned to Isaac, who had taken the seat at table for the one reserved for what comes next. She walked over, sat beside him, no words exchanged, just two hands meeting under the table. Outside, the sign flickered gently. "Simmer and Soul, home starts here." And in the window, for anyone passing by, Nora, smiling, free, full, finally served warm, with grace.